What's up, guys? So today I want to talk about Dispatch once again, specifically about Dispatch Season 2 and how Ad Hoc Studio may be going about Season 2 just because, the way Season 1 ended, it's not exactly the easiest thing to do. Really, it's never easy with these Telltale or really choice-based games. So I made a short like a few days ago talking about how specifically Dispatch would be really hard to make a Season 2 of just because not only the endings you can have, but also the other layers to it. So of course you take the romances, the endings, but then you also have to take into account certain things like who you cut off the team, Sonar or Coop, and then getting toward the end whether or not you're able to redeem them and bring them back on the team, or if you missed that opportunity and now they have to go to prison. Of course, one of the biggest decisions you're able to make in the game is whether or not you kill Shroud. That one I think is actually one of the easiest things to do. Shroud doesn't really need to be mentioned later on in the later seasons depending on which way they go with the story. For the sake of the game, they should probably leave Shroud as like a one and done thing. If they want to reference him, they can do that. Whether he's dead or alive, they can still do that. But I think it's best if they leave Shroud in Season 1, really just to make it easier on themselves. But look, having a sequel to a game where you had to make very big decisions and you had multiple different decisions and romances and even endings, it's not unheard of. The main one that I think of and that many other people think of is Mass Effect, the Mass Effect trilogy. Every one of those games had choices and consequences that carried over into the next game, some bigger than others. Whether that be romances, characters dying, the ending you chose or the ending you got, people you may have killed, people you may have spared, all of that was transferred over into the next game. And I think that's mainly where we should all look at in terms of how Dispatch should go about making a Season 2, because I think they've done it better than anybody else has done it. And it seems like nobody can really replicate what they've done. I do know games like Dragon Age and The Witcher, which I've never played. I've heard those games do have like different decisions that can carry over into the next game, but I don't think they're as big and dramatic as what Mass Effect has done. Spoilers, of course, if you haven't played Mass Effect, but we're going to take a look at Mass Effect 1 first, right? So let's just take Kaidan Alenko and Ashley Williams, two of your squad mates. At a point in time in Mass Effect 1, you have to pick between those two characters. One will live and one will die. Depending on who you let live, let's just say Ashley Williams, who I chose. If you let her live, she will be in the second and third game. Kaidan Alenko, however, since he's dead, he will no longer be in the second and third game, but he will be referenced throughout those two games as if he no longer will not exist, but no longer is alive because he's not alive anymore, and vice versa if you chose Kaidan Alenko. Another example from Mass Effect 1 that carries over to Mass Effect 3, the Rachni Queen. If you spare the Rachni Queen, she's able to help you and the rest of the galaxy in fighting the Reapers in Mass Effect 3. Her and her people, I should say. So you spared the Queen, so now her and all of her people will help you out. Looking at Mass Effect 2, the suicide mission at the end. If you have everybody live throughout the suicide mission, they will return in Mass Effect 3. If you have a few characters or a character who died in that suicide mission, they will now return in Mass Effect 3. And once again, they will be referenced and talked about as if they are dead, because they are. Now, as to how BioWare ended up going through with that, I'm not sure, because I played the Legendary Edition. I don't know how they went about doing it when the games came out initially. The Legendary Edition, all three games are in one application, so all your save files are like in one application, so you just import that to the next game once you finish one. It's very possible that they just asked you what occurred in your games, like if you chose to save this person, if this person died in your playthrough, or it could have just been like you have a save file from a previous game and they somehow got you and import it into the next game. That's possible. Now, saying this out loud and even writing it down on paper, it makes it seem a lot easier than it actually is. Like, to actually execute it, that's where things actually get tough, simply because of all the different outcomes you have to create. Creating different dialogue options for a game is one thing, but then creating different dialogue options and different outcomes and scenarios for each dialogue option and thing that you do, that's a whole other thing. Look at Detroit Become Human, for example. That game is one of the best to do it in terms of decision based. It doesn't have a sequel, so we can't really use that as an example, but in terms of different decisions and outcomes, that game is insane. Depending on your relationships with certain characters, your actions throughout the game, so many different things can occur. So I think that's kind of the main problem that we all see when it comes to Dispatch, or maybe not problem, but obstacle rather. Not saying that Ad Hoc Studio and company are not up to the task, but they are a relatively small studio. Of course, they have people working with them outside of the studio, but it's still a very big task. And are they up to the task? I mean, I think so. with all the effort they put into Dispatch Season 1, I think they can definitely pull off a Season 2 like this. You can tell that this game was not cheap by any means. It doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't look cheap. So much time and effort was put into this game, and I'm sure they could replicate it with the Season 2. Oh, and by the way, I should have said this before, but I guess I'm speaking on this topic as if they continue on the story of Robert and the Z Team, which I think they will do, and I think they definitely should do. I mean, I don't think whatsoever we had enough time with these characters in Season 1. It would be very unfortunate if they just put these characters to the side and gave us a new group of characters and a new protagonist, even though I do think they could pull it off again. I think they should stick with this for as long as they can. Doesn't mean they need to run this series into the ground, right? You could do 3-4 seasons max, and I think that's it for Dispatch. If they believe they can't do any more, or if they believe at some point it just needs to end, then that's fine with me completely. I just think bare minimum we do need a Season 2, and again, the max I think we should get in terms of seasons for Dispatch is probably 4 seasons. If they want to do like spin-offs and things like that, I'd be fine with that too, but in terms of Robert and friends, the Z Team, I think they should probably cap it at like 4 seasons, unless they've got a lot more in store for us that we have no clue about. But yeah, this is something I thought I should talk about because I mean, I've seen a lot of people talk about this. This is something I've thought about a lot. Again, that whole idea of bringing a save file over into the next game and having different scenarios and different dialogue options for different scenarios and different outcomes and different endings. It all sounds easy to do on paper, especially when games have done it in the past, like Mass Effect that I gave an example of. But when it comes down to executing it, it's not easy. I mean, I'm not a game developer by any means. I have no clue, you know, the things they have to go through to do these things, but just looking off the outside or looking from the outside, I can tell it's not an easy job. Also, something I did want to mention, this is something that I've kind of thought of a lot. So a game like Mass Effect, right? That game, it has a lot more lore. Well, looking at it, you know, after the fact especially, right? It has a lot more lore and a lot more, I guess, universe than what we have with Dispatch right now. So when it comes to major decisions and even smaller decisions, some things can kind of take like a backseat, you know? I think they have the advantage of brushing some things to the side and focusing on the new things. Mass Effect essentially is all about saving the universe. You meet all these different people, go to so many different planets, you go through so many different situations and encounters. And because of that, I think they're able to brush certain things to the side and they don't have to have a main focus on it, you know, because things are just so grand in that world. Whereas looking at Dispatch as of right now, things aren't that big, you know, the world isn't, well, as of right now, right, the world isn't necessarily at stake, maybe like the city they live in or something like that, but the world, the universe, the galaxy isn't at stake, so they can't just push to the side certain characters like romances and, you know, your former teammates going to prison. Things are a lot more intimate, I guess that's the phrase I should use for this, a lot more intimate and personal, so they kind of have to focus on these things, especially when you see these characters all the time and then you used to work with them. They almost have no choice but to focus on these characters because you were with them like the entire previous season. Going back to Coop and Sonar, right? Like they were a part of your team at some point and you kicked one of them out, and one of them, well, depending on who you picked, they end up working with Shroud and you end up fighting them. And in the dispatching sessions, if you ended up beating them, you at the end you're given the option to keep them out of prison or you can let them go to prison. A situation like that, right? If you don't allow them to go back to prison, now they're on your team, and if they bring back the Z Team and Robert, then they have to create a whole, essentially like a whole other game where that character is with you the entire time, and vice versa, right? If you allow them to go to prison, then you have an entire game where they're in prison, they're no longer on your team, and you kind of have to figure that out. I hope what I'm saying makes sense. I really do. Maybe this is something I'm thinking of too deeply and the game developers are probably, you know, they probably have no problem with this, but I don't think it's the case. I think things like this take a lot of thought and effort. I honestly think games like Mass Effect and Detroit Become Human made it seem very easy, but I guess as always we'll just have to wait and see, right? But let me know what you guys think. I'm not even gonna ask if you want a season 2 for Dispatch because literally everybody wants a season 2 for Dispatch. I guess I should say, how do you think they should tackle it? Do you think it's best if the Z Team and Robert don't return so it's a little easier on the team for them to make a season 2, or do you think they should definitely bring back the team and Robert? That's what I prefer, and I think that's what they're gonna go with. I think they know these characters are really loved now and they didn't flesh out these characters too much, and I think they kind of left, in a sense, they left that on a cliffhanger. They didn't leave the ending itself on a cliffhanger, but in terms of the characters and where they could go, I think they left that on a cliffhanger. So I think that's the way they should go. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, if you guys enjoy the video, like it up, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.